Meeting. We have a very full agenda today, lots of great guest speakers, so we'll jump right into it. We will be recording this session and it will be available on our website shortly after this meeting. Economic recovery has continued to be strong this summer, and September numbers show no different as we continue to outperform in most sectors. If you look at unemployment rate starting in probably July, we started doing or faring better than the state and definitely than the nation. September numbers are not out yet, but as of August, we are down to 5.5% in La Plata County. I expect us to be under 5 in the 4s as soon as numbers come out in the next couple of weeks. The real estate market continues to lead all sectors in terms of recovery, and these numbers just came out this week. If you look at the number of units sold in September, they've reached an all-time high. We had 186 total units sold, which is compared to 132 in 2019 for September. That's a 41% increase year over year. And if you look back to 2018 and 2017, it's been 100% increase in performance to 2018 and 91% increase in performance to 2017. These numbers have not been seen before, as I said, and we'll have a kind of a full report on all markets. So Bayfield, rural, city, same thing with Durango Rural City as well as Durango Mountain in a newsletter that will come out this week. If you look at pricing, it's also climbing. Both median sold price, which is the 12-month rolling average, as well as average sold price, those continue to climb significantly, again, reaching all-time highs. Right now, there are 300 units under contract, with only 300 units active outside of that. So I expect that by the time we finish 2020, we'll far exceed 2019 numbers as a whole. Again, we'll ask Dan Corman to give us a commentary and have more detail in the newsletter. In terms of how we're balancing this with public health, we've had a slight setback in the last week or two in terms of numbers, even though we're faring better than the state and the country. The state is right now on the backside of a third wave, as you guys have read in the newspapers. But we've had a couple of outbreaks reported and a couple of incidences in our county. The new numbers will come out tomorrow from San Juan Basin Health. But right now, if you look at the new dashboard that they put up indicating where we are in terms of accomplishing the protect our neighbors, we will not do well in terms of new cases reported, as well as hospitalizations. So those numbers need to come around in order for us to be able to qualify and apply for the Protect Our Neighbor. And the reason that's important is that will allow us to increase capacity in all of our businesses. We just completed the phase of strategic planning, which is our workshop last week, and members can expect an outreach from us to get input and feedback relatively soon, within the next couple of weeks. Here's just a quick preview on some of the vision themes that we're rallying around. Obviously, housing, just based on the pressure, the incredible pressure that real estate is having in our area. A cultural shift to economic resiliency, workforce development, capacity and business development. That also includes capacity for recovery, infrastructure and planning on the heels of the new code that came out a couple of weeks ago, and public and private partnership. I want to make everybody aware of a couple of grants that are out there. We'll go into a lot more detail on the Local First and La Plata Cares Fund grant with Monique speaking today, but the Energize Colorado second phase is out. It is open today, and it will close December of 2020. The La Plata Cares Fund is open as well, and that has a tighter deadline. Monique will go into detail here, but that closes October 23rd. Both of these grants are available today for our small businesses. That means under 50 employees. With that, we have a few things coming up that will be on the ballot that I think it's worthy to inform our membership about. We do have an opinion here. The Alliance is for 4A, and you'll understand why when Dan and Mick go through some detail. Dan, thank you for joining us this morning. Mick, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate the opportunity. You know, we have been under a 2-year study, 2.5 years now, of our school district and our facility needs. As all of you know, the last recession has hit public schools pretty heavily through what the state now calls the budget stabilization factor. That's how the state balances their budget. They withhold money from schools and call it an IOU, which will never get paid. We are $55 million short over the last 10 years, and what the Constitution requires us to be funded and what we are being funded. So that obviously puts us in a difficult spot. That being said, it's still our responsibility to do the very best we can with our resources, and hopefully we're showing that. We have during the recession, obviously had to shift away from some of our capital funding. That's something our board is committed to not continuing to do in the future. But we do have pretty massive deferred maintenance systems that need to be replaced that are at end of life or beyond. And so that's a huge part of our capital projects needs in the district. We also are continuing to bring our schools further into the 21st century with technology. We still have 3 schools operating on microwave systems that to get internet access, and in our remote world that we're working in today, that's presenting huge challenges for our teachers and our staff. We do have an aging bus fleet. We have 7 buses that we do need to purchase that are over 200,000 miles. We drive 500,000 miles annually to pick up students and bring them to our schools. We also have 2 major initiatives that we're hoping to accomplish. First is Miller Middle School is one of those buildings that has been built and added onto, and upgrading the systems within that building actually is equal or exceeds the cost of rebuilding the building. And so our recommendation from our outside planning team has been to rebuild Miller Middle School, as well as our career and technical ed programs at the high school have certainly outgrown the space within those within our current facilities. And so we're looking to add an innovation center that would serve far more than just our students. It would also serve our community. We're looking at career pathways that not only our students can pursue, but also our adults in our community through partnerships with our post-secondary institutions. And so all of that, coupled with the most important thing, which is our safety and security measures. Many of you who have been in our schools know that if you get in the front door, you can actually get to children before you ever pass an office. And so we do have some pretty major safety and security refinements that need to be made to ensure that our children are always safe in this world that we live in today. People in Sandy Hook several years ago would have never imagined what would have happened there. We believe that we want to make sure that we are proactive in ensuring that those not occur. We are in a sweet spot in that our 2002 bond that our community overwhelmingly supported is nearing its sunset. So we're in a position recognizing that our community is still hurting from both the COVID crisis and climbing out of the prior recession, that asking for additional money right now is not wise. So we're in an amazing opportunity that we can actually bond $90 million without asking for an additional dime from anyone in our community. That coupled with premiums could net approximately $110 million. One thing I did fail to mention is that our charter schools, all 3 charter schools in our community, both our Colorado State charter schools as well as our own charter school, are participating and will receive necessary funds to improve their facilities. So again, this is a 2.5-year effort. This isn't a whim and hey, we want money, let's ask for it. We've had over 25 members of our community participating in a long-range planning effort led by Andy Burns, our previous deputy superintendent. And all of these needs are being brought to you after long consideration. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mick.
Hey, good morning. So I want to just highlight a couple of things. So the planning process for the Board of Education, I'm sorry, I'm a school board member. The planning process for the Board of Education caused us to thoughtfully consider whether we were going to go for a bond this year in the middle of the COVID recession, or were we going to wait until 2021 because of the needs. And we thought, recessions don't get, despite our recovery, we don't really know what the future brings. So we thought that this was the right year to bring this bond to the community, bond issue to the community. We did consider at one point whether we should actually ask for a tax increase. We didn't feel we could do that. So the board authorized in late August that we put this on the ballot. We've seen a lot of support in the community. We actually haven't seen any significant opposition to it. We've had great conversations with folks like Jack Llewellyn and the chamber, which has endorsed this. Our associations have endorsed this. That we've gotten help from the Colorado Education Association in material support for helping us figure out which voters would be likely to support the bond. And if you are in town, you might have seen some of our flyers going under your doors or the doors of your neighbors. So we do have approximately 30 volunteers that have been helping with this, actively helping. So we have the support that way. We're encouraging everybody to support this, of course. And I can take any questions, or Dan can if you have any.
Thank you, Mick. If you have any questions for either Mick or Dan, just please tap them into the chat and we'll let those guys answer them. Dan, Mick, thank you for joining us. Again, the Alliance is in support of this. We believe that any kind of investment like this, which does not impact our taxpayers into education, is great for economic development. And I know that this kind of money would have an impact in the local economy as you hire contractors and folks to go out and execute on some of the plans. There is a full schedule of where Dan and the board plan to spend the money. We have sent that out, but we'll make that available on our website as well. Dan, offline, I think Jessica wants to talk to you about electric buses, which I think is phenomenal. Yeah. With that said, we're gonna go on to the next topic that you'll see on the ballot. We're very lucky to have Jennifer Cassell join us this morning. She's a partner with Bodwich and Cassell, and she will speak about Amendment B regarding Gallagher and Proposition 118.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. My name is Jennifer Castle. I have been a lobbyist now for, oh gosh, I don't know, several years. I lobby on behalf of the Economic Development Council of Colorado. So I was connected here via Emily, who does serve on our Public Policy Committee, and we're lucky to have her on there. I do also work with SCAPE down in your area as well, too. So I'm going to talk, there's 11 initiatives on the ballot in November, and that's just statewide. I'm sure there's more initiatives on the local level, but I'm going to speak specifically about 2, and these are more so. These initiatives will affect business. They do affect economic development, so it's important to hit on these 2. So the first one is Amendment B. Go ahead, Michael. I think you can. There we go. Okay. The Gallagher repeal. So I believe most of you probably know some of the details of the Gallagher Amendment. This was an amendment to the Constitution that was put in place in the 80s as a way to control property taxes, especially property taxes on residences. What the amendment actually does is that the Gallagher Amendment, that is, excuse me, it set a ratio for assessing residential versus non-residential property, the 45-55 split, and again, as a way to control residential property taxes to keep them low. That assessment rate floats. The non-residential, any type of commercial buildings, vacant land, ag, would get assessed the non-residential rate. So what Amendment B would do is that it would repeal this ratio that is in the Constitution, this 45-55 split. Over the years, the residential assessment rate has dropped. It has gone, I believe it started somewhere in the lower 20%, excuse me. It is now down to 7.15%. And the legislature does have to adjust the residential assessment rate every 2 years in order to fit that 45-55 split. So the legislature has essentially been forced to lower the residential assessment rate. Michael, I think I've got some graphs on the next slide so that you can see it. So the issue that we're talking about here is if you are a homeowner, a property owner, residential property owner, you pay you do not pay that much in taxes as it relates to other states. We have very low property taxes here in Colorado. This top graph on this slide shows that decline in the residential assessment rate. And then just to kind of put things into perspective so you can see the calculation of what has happened since 1981 to 2018 is that a market value of a home for $300,000, you can see what it would have been in 1981 and what it is now. So something substantially lower. So you can see that reduction of property tax revenue that counties are seeing, that your fire districts see, that school districts see, all of that. So what are the impacts of this? What exactly does it mean when this residential assessment rate is dropping? Well, first and foremost, it has an impact on our business community. If you look at these two charts, the first one over here on the left, what the Gallagher Amendment says is that we have to maintain this 45-55 split between the residential and non-residential value. When in actuality, residential value in the state makes up 80% of the value here in Colorado. So right off the bat, our business community, those individuals that own non-residential property are taking a hit. They are the ones that are really paying the majority of our property taxes. Over here on the right, that graph, you can tell the difference between a commercial or industrial building, what they would pay in property tax on a $1 million property versus what a homeowner would pay on their residence. So this is just this is an impact to business because it is costing businesses more to do business. Go ahead, Michael. The second one, so school finance. So as your superintendent mentioned, school districts have taken a hit with the recession. They've also taken a hit because of Gallagher, because the drop in the residential assessment rate. This graph shows you how the state and local communities fund school finance, how they basically fund schools. So you can see the state share and the local share have essentially flipped. So the state is now backfilling what local communities cannot essentially put into their schools. So with continuing decrease of local communities collecting property tax, that local share is going to continue to drop, which does put burden on the state budget, but also how do locals then make up for that? Locals go to their voters to ask for mill levy increases, bond increases, right? And that creates inequality in certain communities. There are some communities that have the means that can pass mill levy overrides, and there's others that aren't quite as fortunate. So there is a big inequity as it relates to school districts. The third impact that I wanted to highlight is that you're taking a cut to your special districts and to your counties. So in 2017, when we had another reduction of the residential assessment rate, 7.96%, counties and special districts took a 10% reduction. That is projected to drop to a 19% reduction if the residential assessment rate falls again in 2021. Excuse me, that is a typo on my graph there. It should say 2021. So your counties and your special districts are taking a hit by not being able to collect as much revenue. Again, you're then asking for special districts to be able to make up that money somehow by going to their voters and asking for additional funds. I believe the La Plata County Fire District is set to lose anywhere of upwards of $800,000 if the Gallagher Amendment is not repealed. So there is a unique impact that Gallagher does have on rural communities. Rural communities don't have, they don't share the increased market value of homes the way that some communities have in the Front Range. So while the assessment rate is going down, the values of property are not going up. So the local communities, rural communities, are not able to collect as much property tax as some urban areas are. Rural communities also have a smaller commercial property tax base. We don't have the big hubs, the big industrial complexes that you do in urban areas. Also, this formula is really based on what is happening at the Front Range. The Front Range is really driving this conversation and are really the ones that are that's forcing the rate down, the residential assessment rate down. Go ahead, Michael. Thank you. So just some conclusions here. If you choose to support Amendment B, or if you don't choose to support Amendment B, at the end of the day, if you are a homeowner, you are a winner. You will continue to pay low property taxes. However, some of your local service providers, again, your fire districts, water districts, sanitation districts will take a hit. Your schools will take a hit too, and businesses will pay more than their fair share in property taxes. There are some pro and arguments for and against that I'm happy to let you all read on your own. I would also refer you to the Blue Book to get some more information on this as well too, that does lay out some things. And in full transparency, the EDCC has taken a support position on Amendment B. Okay. Michael, is there a way that we wanted to handle questions, or should I just keep going? And if there's additional questions, then.
Yeah, Jennifer, we'll do the same. If people have questions, they can put it into chat and you can answer them. When you say that the EDCC is it's for the repeal, correct?
Yes, it is for the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment through their support of Amendment B, which will be on the ballot this November.
Right.
Yeah. Hopefully that's clear as mud. Okay. The other initiative that's going to be on the ballot that will have an effect on business and how businesses do business is Proposition 118. This is a paid family and medical leave program that would be statewide. It would be state run through the Department of Labor and Employment. So a couple of things about this, and I'm going to throw quite a bit of information at you on this one because there are a lot of details to it. So this program is essentially providing wage replacement for an employee who wants to take leave for a specific reason that will be outlined, and I'll mention what some of those are. That employee can take up to 12 weeks per year and have some partial wage replacement. That employee's job is also protected. So that employer would not be able to fire that employee or hire somebody into that person's position. The cost of this program would be split 50-50 with the employer and the employee, both paying a premium. And then this program would be mandatory for employers with 10 or more employees. There are some exclusions for this. Michael, I'll have you change the slide. I believe the next slide shows exclusions, or maybe it does. Oh, excuse me, maybe it doesn't. But this graph does kind of help you understand some of the just the basic details with this. You can see what those benefits would be, what absences would be covered. So oftentimes it is to take care of a child. That could be a mother or a father. Taking care of yourself if you have a serious illness, taking care of a family member that has a serious illness as well too. Okay, next slide. There we go. So there are exclusions. Local governments are exempt. Any employer who has 9 or fewer employees, as well as self-employed individuals, and then employers who also offer this type of program currently. And again, the reasons for leave: you have a family member. Those family members is a close blood relative, child, sibling, parent, domestic partner, spouse, grandparent, etc. Okay, go ahead. Thank you. And just an example of what a premium would be for an employer versus an employee. The 2 columns over here on the right just help put things into perspective of what the cost would actually be for a year once those premiums will be collected in 2023. And those premiums are based on an employee's wage. So you can see what those 2 costs are. The next slide shows you what the benefits would be if you are an employee and what you would be taking. There is a maximum weekly wage that you would be able to receive, and that is $1,100. Even if your average weekly wage goes above that, you're not allowed to take more than $1,100. Okay. Again, some arguments for and against. Excuse me. A little transparency here. EDCC is opposed to this position, to this proposition. This is a measure. While the business community does support family leave, the business community more so feels that this shouldn't be a state-run program. By the time the program is fully implemented in 2024 and employees are receiving benefits from this program, it's projected to cost of upwards of $1 billion with added government employees of, I believe, about 70 or so government employees. So it would be a very large program within the Department of Labor and Employment. That entity would be the ones responsible for collecting premiums, for giving out the benefits. So an employer would not do that. It would be the State Department of Labor and Employment. And that was all that I had. And again, I would just refer you to the State Blue Book should you need more information. Hopefully you all have received your ballots. They were mailed out last week. And then of course, I encourage you to vote. So thank you.
Jennifer, if you would stick around and answer some questions in the Q&A. So I was mistaken. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature, not chat, to ask questions. And Jennifer, you can maybe answer them in the Q&A. Just like the EDCC, the Alliance is strongly in favor of the appeal of Gallagher due to the unintended consequences that it's had, especially in our community. And with that, I think Chief Howell has a few comments to discuss the impact of districts such as his fire district.
Sure, thanks for having me. This is Hal Dowdy. I'm the fire chief at Durango Fire Rescue. And I just was asked to come on to represent what the possible adjustment of Gallagher would mean for local services like your fire and ambulance service. When we look at that adjustment, it's a 19% downward adjustment of the assessment rate, but then you have to consider what the composite of your taxing district is in order to figure that out. So it gets very complicated, as Ms. Castle talked about. For Durango Fire Rescue, we're looking at, if that adjustment happens that they're projecting from 7.1 down to 5.82, it's going to mean an $817,000 per year revenue loss for the fire district, which is, obviously a tremendous amount of loss of revenue. And this is being driven by really the housing boom that's going on the Front Range. And so while they're enjoying the increase in assessed value of having more and more value of property as the housing area grows there. Rural Colorado is not benefiting from the same growth. And so where on the Front Range, their growth is compensatory to the adjustment downward of the assessment rate, that's not the case for any of rural Colorado. One of the really compelling factors that got my attention when I started studying this is that there is no statewide property tax. And so property taxation really is representative of supporting local services. And you heard what those services are. You're talking about special districts such as fire and ambulance districts. You're talking about local government that's providing local services like streets and road and bridge, human services, things like that. And you're talking about our schools. So the effort to repeal Gallagher really is an effort to try to protect and maintain the local services that we all enjoy and that we have pretty consistently supported throughout the years. And it's a protection to keep the changes that are going on in the metro areas where we don't benefit from the growth, and to assure that we can still afford to provide the services for folks that live in rural Colorado. Thanks very much for giving me the time.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate you being here. Chief, would you hang out for just a little bit and answer any questions as well, and maybe provide some commentary that or questions that were provided to Jennifer?
Sure, I'd be glad to do that. And also, if anybody has any questions they'd like answered, offline, I'm absolutely available to do that as well.
Okay, fantastic. Jennifer, again, I know you're busy. It's election season. You have a lot going on. So thank you so much for joining us this morning and giving us that input.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
Next up, I'd like to welcome the La Plata Electric Chief Executive Officer, Jessica Matlock. Jessica, thank you so much for being here.
You bet. Thanks for having me. I think you can advance to the next slide. Great. So today, with only 10 minutes, I'm going to give you a snapshot of really what our focus is right now, but let everybody know that at the end of my presentation, I also have some information about town hall meetings. So we are going to have some town hall meetings in the next couple weeks in the evenings, and it's in each of our 4 districts. So there will be 4 of them, and they will be run by each of our board members that represent those districts. So we'll get into more detail if you guys have questions. But right now, we're really looking at our power supply. I think that a lot of questions have come up during COVID about resilient grid networks, right? So if our large power supply facilities in Denver and other parts of the state are shut down due to COVID or any other reason like cybersecurity attacks, which are increasing across the US at electric utilities, we would be dark in Southwest Colorado. And so there is an increased need to improve and increase resiliency, which is local energy supply. We are fortunate in Southwest Colorado to have a lot of solar. We have the best solar potential in the state of Colorado. So it's an untapped resource that's at a very low cost, and I'll get into that. So over 63% of our costs that go into any rate increases or any of our rates is the cost of power. And as you can see by that pie chart, it's a significant amount of our focus, and this is why. So you can go to the next slide. Besides wanting to control our costs and the cost of power, we have some other requirements that our board has set forth. And one of those is local control. So as you can see in our vision statement, they really want us to work towards building community partnerships, innovation, being a forward-thinking industry leader, which means let's look at beneficial electrification, which is not just electric vehicles, it's also conversion of propane, which is pretty expensive, to more efficient, cheaper electric heat. So it's a variety of things. and then delivering excellence. So that's the resiliency and reliability of the grid. Next slide. The other goal that the board put forward to staff is sustainability. So this strategic goal was made about 2 years ago before I arrived, but is to reduce our carbon footprint by 50% from our 2018 levels. And the issue about keeping our rates, our cost of electricity lower than 70% is just to say we don't want to raise rates due to bringing on more renewables. And actually in today's world, and I'll show you a graph of where renewables are pricing, if we go towards more renewables, then we're paying less for energy supply, and that's the intent. Okay, next slide. So this is our current generation mix. So in order to meet that goal that I just mentioned, we have to almost make this, the coal number, cut in half. So 50% of our power is from coal. Tri-State has 25% renewables. That pie is increasing. So Tri-State has committed to lowering that coal content over time. Natural gas is at 18%, and we are only allowed to self-generate 5% of our power supply. And so that 5% is renewables, and we've met that cap. So we can't go beyond any additional self-supply with Tri-State. And so that's why we're looking into, okay, so Tri-State, what can we do to improve flexibility, to improve local control, resilient grid networks, and lower our carbon content. And so I'll get into a little bit what we're doing. Okay, next slide. So some questions we get, are renewables more expensive? And they're not. So the next slide shows just a simple graph. And in fact, this graph is even lower. So in 2019, the cost of solar energy was at $40 per megawatt. And that number is even lower now. And so this cost of solar compared to coal or gas is creeping down over time, and not even creeping, it's leaping down. That's the same with wind and other renewables. So even Tri-State CEO Dwayne Hiley has come out and stated that he can actually lower costs by 20% or more by moving away from his coal-fired facilities to renewables. So we are experiencing the same. Okay, next slide. So what are our options? We can go to the next slide. So currently right now, we have a contract with Tri-State that expires in 2050. We are only able to generate 5% of that energy. And our energy mix right now with the coal and the gas is 70% fossil fuel. So as you can tell, we want to reduce that pretty significantly. So right now, one of our internal goals is to reduce our carbon emissions by 50%, obviously. And we're thinking that right now we can do that only through revising our current contract with Tri-State. Okay, next slide. So last fall, the board requested a three-pronged strategy of staff to look at. And the first one is pursue more flexibility in our current contract. The second one is a partial contract option with Tri-State, where maybe we only get 50% of our power from Tri-State, and the other 50% we generate locally. And then the third option is, well, what would it be to buy out of Tri-State fully? And I think, as most people know, our sister utility up north in Delta Montrose just successfully bought out of Tri-State, and they're seeing a 15 to 17% rate decrease because they were able to buy out of the contract and acquire much cheaper renewables. And so we feel it's our responsibility to at least look at that option. Unfortunately, that's the one that's gotten the most press because we asked for the buyout number last summer from Tri-State. They refused to give us the number, so we had to take it to the Colorado PUC, which is the regulatory body that regulates Tri-State. So that has been at that commission, and we should know more as of November 9th. They're looking at a couple different things. They're looking at, did Tri-State legally add some additional cooperatives that are farming cooperatives to Tri-State's membership? Because they did that, it bumped them into federal regulation at FERC. That's what FERC is, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is in Washington, D.C. So there's a little bit of a, is it regulated by Colorado Tri-State on Colorado power supply issues, or does FERC regulate it? So it gets really complicated. So we're kind of stuck in the middle and we're waiting for a decision between the two bodies on where is it appropriately regulated. Okay, next slide. So as I mentioned, a lot of what I talked about today, you can please join these town hall meetings. These are the dates. If you can't remember what these dates were, it's on our website or social media, you can look those up, but we will be going through a more detailed presentation of our power supply, what we're looking at, where we're at in the process, because we are, just to let people know, on that second option with the partial contract, we're still aggressively working on that in a nice way with Tri-State. They're partnering with us on what would it look like to acquire some of our energy right away from renewables and right away get a reduction in costs. So that's a pretty exciting option as well. So please join us at those events, and that's it.
Jessica, I assume all these events are virtual and they're Zoom meetings with a link?
That's correct. Yes. And so you have to sign up for those. And so do go on our website and all the details are on there.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll advertise these as well, Jessica, to the membership. One other question I had for you is, in these town halls, you'll go into the content that you just covered. Is there additional information in the town halls that you're covering?
No, the same information is going to be at all the town hall meetings, and it's focused on power supply.
Okay, fantastic. I know that Hillary has advertised also a grant, the COVID-related grant for those that are heavily impacted. Is that still available through La Plata Electric?
Yes, any individual that has been impacted by COVID can apply for a $100 credit on their energy bill, and we still have funds available. And any small business that has also been impacted, there's a $200 credit. So definitely please apply for those. We have about $20,000 left in the fund, so we still have a good amount. But I'm assuming that fund will be closed probably after this year. But yes, please apply for that.
Fantastic. And they can do that on the website as well.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you so much. Just thank you for your time. If you have any questions for Jessica, please tap them into the Q&A, and Jessica will do her best to get to all those today.
Yeah, Michael, one more thing. It's, if you guys one in the community has great ideas or thoughts, let us know. For example, the 9R working on school buses. There is state funds available for conversion of any bus to electric. And that helps us personally meet our carbon goal as well, but also it helps with air quality and kids, their air quality, and senior citizens, others disadvantaged. And so it's a really great opportunity, and there is state funding for that. And just one more point, we are looking at broadband. We have a broadband committee. So I would suggest if anyone is interested to contribute or look at what we're examining, go to our website. We have a broadband committee page, and I've posted on there our kind of strategic framework of what we're looking at, what questions we're asking. And so I would suggest if anybody has any other additional thoughts they want us to examine, or questions or ideas, there's a link in there that you can submit those, and that goes to the full committee. So please take the time to look at that. I think through COVID, one thing we've realized is we need better broadband. So we're going to be looking at that.
Thank you, Jessica. I would assume that we'll probably invite you or somebody that heads up your committee to come back and talk specifically about broadband, because it is becoming a more critical utility with COVID, and everybody has seen that.
Yes, we'd actually like to have that opportunity to do kind of a Q&A session and get feedback as well. That's perfect.
Great, fantastic, fantastic. We have, speaking of grants, one of the grants that we alluded to at the beginning of the meeting was the La Plata CARES Fund. So with us today is Monique. DiGiorgio from Local First to speak about that grant. Monique?
Thank you so much, Mike. Yeah, and exciting to be able to share this news along with all the other good information this morning. You can just go to the overview since I know we're running kind of short on time, but this is a grant opportunity that has been made available thanks to La Plata County, which is really exciting. They have chosen Local First to administer the grant, and then we have partnered with Aid to All to create a community platform and portal for the business community to apply. And the CARES grant funding is federal funding made available through the county. Local First will write the checks to the business community, and they are grants of up to $10,000. Right now, we have a committed amount of $810,000 available. It's possible that we could have more. What we're going to be doing as we're in the midst of the application process right now is determining what the full need of the business community is. And then we're going to be working with the county finance director to see if there's a need greater than 810,000. Is there a way for us to meet that need? So based on that, I would really encourage any business owners here on the call today to apply as soon as you can. You do have until October 23rd, as Mike mentioned. However, the sooner that we see the full breadth of the need of the business community, the sooner we can see if there's a way to meet that need if it is above 810,000. And I will say that as of today, we have about 87 applications in process. So I'm thinking that we will see a need of greater than 810,000. The funds will be dispersed mid-November to the end of December. It's not first come, first serve. So don't feel like you have to rush to get the application in. We are reviewing all applications to make sure that we really maximize the impact of the grant and don't just give the grants to those that get in the door first. The funds have to be for out-of-pocket expenses incurred between March 1st and December 30th. And that sounds a little confusing, and it is because the application process closes before December 30th. So what we're asking you to do is provide receipts for expenses that have been paid and purchased, or purchase orders for any work that you would like done basically between now and December 30th. And so we would ask that you provide those purchase orders. We can then approve that it's an eligible expense. And then we'll probably have a process to make sure that you can get back in touch with us to give us the receipts for the final expenditures. So the next slide just provides a very brief overview of the intent. Really, the intent is very similar to many of the other COVID funding sources, which that the businesses need to demonstrate a sizable impact from COVID. And that can be anything from loss of revenue to temporary business closures, prohibition of physical operations. But the funds, even though you demonstrate, let's say, a loss, the funds really need to be used on that reimbursable expense. You can go to the next slide, Mike, thanks. So the eligibility is 50 full-time equivalent employees or less as of March 16th. On the application process, you will see a question that says, how many employees did you have on March 16th? And that's just based on our contract and kind of to have that cutoff date. You have to be located in La Plata County, so that address you give us needs to be in the county. It can be for-profit and non-for-profits. You have to have a direct physical in-person interaction with customers. That can be a home business. Multiple locations can apply. So Zia Trattoria is always the one that's on the top of my head, that they've got 2 locations. So you'd be eligible for $10,000 for each location. You do need to have been in business since March 16th, even though the reimbursable expenses are March 1st to December 30th. And you do also have to have self-certified with San Juan Basin Public Health. We will ask you at the end of the application process to attest to that fact. Thanks, Mike. We can go to the next slide. What the businesses that are ineligible are any business that's fully remote. Marijuana, adult entertainment businesses cannot apply. Franchise businesses can apply only if they can show local ownership control. And that is really the thinking of keeping the dollars that La Plata County is putting into La Plata County, keeping it local, which of course is what we're all about at Local First. Next slide. So I just wanted to, let's see, explain the allowable versus non-allowable. Again, this concept of out-of-pocket expense. So I think one really good example is that you have to tie this reimbursable expense to the COVID impact, right? So rent is one that comes up often. Rent would have been paid for before and after COVID. We totally understand that rent is a hardship due to COVID, but for this particular pot of money, the only reimbursable and allowable expenses are to say, well, I had this expense because of the impact of COVID. So some examples are PPE, not just the PPE itself, but I've gotten some interesting examples of either staff or contractors that needed to be paid to create the PPE. That's a great example. That's like not on this list. So take the list with a grain of salt, and there's going to be lots of examples that maybe don't fit on this bullet point. Building safety upgrades, technology upgrades, response measures, advertising, marketing. So if you had that loss in your business and you had to ramp up marketing, that is eligible. Legal or consulting support. Not allowable, as I mentioned, is any kind of loss coverage or an expense that you already would have had. Also, please be really cognizant that if you're applying for other federal funding or even state and local funding, that we don't want to double dip. So whatever you ask for from La Plata Cares, we should be the only funding source for that expense. Now, that said, I feel like the last time I gave this presentation, people felt like they could apply for GAP or La Plata Cares. You can absolutely apply for both. Just make sure that they're different expenses that you're applying for each, which gets to the next slide, which is, I think these two funding sources are actually pretty complementary the more that I look into it. Some few differences is that GAP is fewer than 25 FTE and La Plata is fewer than 50. GAP can cover a loss, La Plata Cares can't. GAP is up to 15,000. Whereas La Plata Cares is up to 10,000, and GAP is prioritizing minority-owned businesses, veteran, women-owned businesses. We're looking at all of the businesses in La Plata County and not prioritizing really by any one factor. Our selection committee really wanted to make sure that we just maximized impact. And on that note, talking with Brian Rose from the GAP Fund, that's a statewide pot of money. It's very competitive. So if you're located in La Plata County, La Plata Cares is going to be really a good fit for your business. We'll go to the next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about the selection committee, which is that La Plata County was very, very clear that this is a funding source for the entire county, whether you're in an incorporated town or not. And so we're making sure that we have really diverse representation from Durango, Ignacio, Bayfield, Vallecito, and make sure that our grants really reflect that. We can go to the next slide. So the process is at localfirst.aidtoall.org. Aid to All has put together an incredible portal that we never, ever would have been able to do without their help. And there is a brief there that I would really encourage you to look at. The first page really outlines everything that I just said. The second page we just put up a couple days ago really helps you through the application process. For example, the page will time out after 30 minutes if you try to type directly in it and then you walk away, so that we can keep your information safe and secure. So if you haven't used an online application process, please look at that second page to make sure you don't lose any of your data. And then there are certain attachments that you'll need to upload. What you can do when you go to that website that's on the screen there is on the top right-hand corner, there'll be a list of everything that you need to compile for the grant so that you can feel like you can put that together offline and then go ahead and apply. So just start to get in mind, you need your W-9s, some financial statements, and the most important thing are the receipts, invoices, and purchase orders for the expenses you're going to ask La Plata Cares to cover. Thank you, Mike. I think that might be it. Let's see what the next slide is. Yeah. Just a reminder that Local First represents the local independent business community in La Plata County. We're really, really pleased that the county partnered with us and Aid to All to provide this support to the business community. I am here to answer any questions. So if you email La Plata Cares at local-first.org, I try to get back to everyone within 24 hours. And so far, it looks like the business community has been able to navigate the process with 84 applications in progress. We're thinking that the word is out, but please do share that this is open until October 23rd. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you, Monique. So again, the the URL to go to the application is www.localfirst.aidtoall.org. Is there a link on your website, Monique, or Aid to All website to get there as well?
No, there's not. I think the county website has a link as well, or just go ahead and email me and I can send you the link.
Okay, and we'll advertise that heavily here. We've sent out a mass email, but we'll do that again this week based on the pending deadline of the 23rd.
Great.
Thank you, Monique. I did hear that the GAP fund was reloaded with some money just recently, so would strongly encourage small businesses, which is 90% of La Plata County, to go out and qualify for one or both of these grants. We've got 2 minutes left in the meeting, so we're going to bypass municipal updates. We'll make sure and have those in our newsletter that we'll publish here shortly. And again, a copy of this meeting will be on our website within a couple hours. With that, I'd like to thank all of our speakers. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It was a very, very informative meeting, a quick 1 hour, and I wish you all a great day and a great week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mike.